I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 143 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, EMDR consultant. I am so excited to have a special guest today, Brent Gairy, who is a fractional corporate marketing officer and my fractional corporate marketing officer, who is behind the scenes on a ton of stuff that I do. And I wanted to have him on because he is an expert. Well, I will just read his bio and then you will get an idea. So Brent Gairy is a marketing strategist and founder of Gairy Consulting, where he helps founders and growing businesses turn their expertise into authority through SEO, AEO, which he told me means, now correct me if I'm wrong, Brent, answer engine optimization.
You got it.
So answer being like, we're talking about ChatGPT, Gemini. So it's not just SEO anymore, as we know. It's not just search engine. It's AI engine. So that's what AEO is. And structured marketing systems. Acting as a fractional CMO, Brent focuses on building clear messaging, high converting websites, and content engines that drive long-term visibility and growth. His work sits at the intersection of strategy, design, and storytelling, helping clients move from scattered activity to intentional, sustainable marketing. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Brent. And I first wanted to say, I think we've been working together for maybe 6 years, 5 years. How long has it been?
It's been a while, definitely like more than half a decade.
Yeah. So Brent you've been behind every website I've ever had for anything, and so much of my social media stuff, email, so much stuff. And so it's been really fun to have you watch my business grow. You've really been there from the beginning.
I know, and it's been a two-way street because I learn a lot from how you operate as a business owner, and it gives me a lot of like insights. I'm like, oh, you know what, I can use it in other places as well. So yeah, it's been foundational to how I operate as a CMO.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And so I'm just so excited to have you here today because you were saying before we started recording that what you focus on for all your clients, but we're going to really talk about it from a therapist perspective, is taking your client's expertise, right? Making it visible. So translating it into visibility and having that turn into authority.
Exactly.
Authority in terms of like, how someone is perceived, but I would assume also in terms of how, search engines and AI stuff and, algorithms, all those things view those people as an authority, right?
Exactly. Right. So we don't mean it from authority from like an ego perspective. It's right. More about how does, like we mentioned, these platforms, Google, ChatGPT, how do they perceive you as an authority in your field? And there's a term I hear all the time from my mentor. He's like, you should never be a secret agent. And I think a lot of times as professionals, we're like, the work should speak for itself, and that's it. And unfortunately, algorithms don't look at it that way. They look at it as authority. And if you don't have visibility, and if you don't have, citations from relevant sources, then you don't have authority. So when someone is looking you up, you may not show up in the way that you assume you would show up because of the work that you've been doing.
Or you might not show up at all.
Or exactly. And that's where with the AEO, unfortunately, I think it's such like a new field that most of us aren't showing up at all inside of ChatGPT.
Right. And that's where we all know now, you go to Google, the first thing that comes up is an AI summary.
Exactly.
Or whatever it is you're looking for. And I use them. I'm not going to pretend I don't. So I think that what would be so useful for people to hear, because I know from the therapists I work with and talk to, everyone knows SEO is important and has some idea what it is. Most therapists know that AI is a thing, but are really scared about it and terrified. And so I'm wondering if you could talk through a little bit about what are some things therapists really need to know about this landscape, how it's changing, what they should be doing in terms of their marketing, from a pretty basic level, because I promise you, most of us know nothing and are afraid to find out what we're already scared of it, and we don't know what we don't know. So what would you say are some of the basic things that people need to know in this new landscape?
Sure. So I think one of the things I've discovered is SEO and AEO are similar, but they kind of fundamentally work different in different ways to get to like the same result. So in SEO, you might be familiar with keywords. I need to have certain keywords when people search in Google that if I put it on my webpage, Google will, identify my page as a source and then show it on the list of results. Now with
Right.
AEO, let's just say chatbot, you're typing in a question, and then what the chatbot is doing is not looking so much at the keywords on a page, is looking for answers. So if you're not answering a question that's relevant to what the search is looking for, it may just bypass your website entirely as a source, right? The other thing about AEO in particular is that it's not just looking at your website, it's looking at everything it can get its hands on. So, for example, for me, it looks at my LinkedIn content. It's looking at, for you in particular, your YouTube videos, your Instagram content, as well as your website content. And it kind of creates like this mosaic, and then it generates an answer from those pieces of data. So if you don't have that variety of data sources to pull from, it's just like, well, you don't exist. So you may
Right.
show up on Google from a search query, but in terms of a chat engine, you may not exist at all because you don't have enough of that mosaic of content.
And here's a question, even from like a Google search, are if someone has more of a presence across multiple platforms,
Mhm.
is that also going to positively influence their SEO?
Uh, Not so
Is that
much.
not so much?
Technically, short answer is yes, but SEO is heavily weighted in terms of your website content.
Okay.
And now also if you have, let's say, YouTube content, that affects SEO
Oh,
because the second biggest search engine is YouTube. So those
okay.
descriptions, right, that you have in your videos, if
Uh-huh.
it's relevant to the content that's on your website, Google connects those pieces together as like a source of information when it does the results.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So YouTube is a really important and
Users are really
powerful.
important, right? And now a big change with SEO is that Meta, they've decided to open up their platform. So before, Instagram wasn't being indexed, and when I mean indexed, it wasn't being read by Google search engines. It was blocked, and I think Meta realized, well, it's great that we have all these users on Instagram, let's say in particular, but if no one can find it except for those users, there's a bigger audience that's not seeing the content. So now you're seeing people's Instagram posts show up on Google results. So if you have a lot of content with EMDR, you may start to see the videos and the posts in the search results now.
So it sounds like this is good for me to know, good for me, that if you have a strong social media presence, it's now going to start having an SEO impact.
Right. And that's why it's important when you're creating content to not just think of your captions as throwaway information, right? Like the head of Instagram has explicitly stated that Instagram is trying to become a search engine. So what you're typing into the captions matters way more than hashtags. Hashtags is it's still a thing, but it's really been has diminished in terms of usefulness as opposed to keywords. So if you're thinking about EMDR intensives and like the perpetrator parts and things like that, if you have that in the captions of your whether it's a reel, a carousel, that actually has ranking ability inside of Instagram, but also on Google search engines now.
I want to just point out that you just said perpetrator part. So everyone needs to know that because Brent has been working with me for so long, he knows all about the EMDR and parts work therapy speak. So if you work with him, you have a huge leg up because he already knows all that stuff. You don't have to teach him any of those things.
Well, I mean, I would never try to like actually use it in like a real sentence, but
No,
you
but
know, like, but it's like you're right. I mean, it's like I'm familiar with a lot of like the terminology. Yes. Yeah.
right, because for example, Brent, you do all my carousel posts for my podcast episodes and write the captions and also like all my video, all podcast content you create. So if people see that and read it, I know they do, like it reads great. So it's very aligned to what like you have learned, I think, a lot about like the nuts and bolts of what I do on a, and so I'm just saying that as like a,
Yeah. No,
for other therapists who
yeah, I
work, you're
appreciate that.
a great
And
person to do that with.
yeah, and that kind of goes back to like a topic that I always say, like I work with my clients directly. It's not just like a throw it over the fence type of work. It's like a collaborative, you know,
We
engagement
have
to really
a real
understand. Yeah.
relationship, which is so valuable. And I feel like you truly understand what I'm trying to do as a business owner. And that is such an asset because I don't have to explain to you, why something is valuable or why it needs to be done this way. Like you just really get it. And you have excellent communication, which is awesome. So
Thank you. Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about how do you, that expertise to visibility to authority thing.
Mhm.
What's that process look like? And I know you just redesigned my practice website. And I don't know if that's like a way to talk about it or if you want to talk more generally, but I think people would be really interested in how do you I think they all get why that's important. Like I think we all can see that. How do you actually make that happen
Yeah.
so that
Okay.
they're
So yeah.
getting
So
AEO?
yeah. So the first thing is to really understand the business, right? The owner, like see yourself. What are your goals, right? Because we don't understand the goals, then we could just create something that has no bearing on the success that you're trying to get. So we understand that. Then and then I'll ask you a lot of questions about your what's new in the business. Like I know you've kind of like we've talked about like some of the pivots that you've made and whatnot. So understanding the landscape first and foremost is key for the foundation, so that when we're doing things like creating the service pages, the all the copy, right? It has to be grounded in the reality of who you are, what your business is, and where it's going. So we create the so before we do any sort of like visual work, we're doing copy. So we like for you, we had the Google Docs where it was just page by page. Some of them I started writing, some of them you started writing, and it was like a process where we combined edits together to form like the cohesive pages, so that because from your standpoint, you write really well from a human to human standpoint. I have to make sure that it's also relevant for like search engines and
Right.
answer engines. So that's where we have to like tone it down a bit and whatnot. So that's kind of like getting the expertise like established. Then the
Can I give
visibility.
an example of that?
Mhm.
So in terms of like pivoting, right? So one thing that you and I on my new practice website, first of all, it was incredibly outdated in that it still said I lived in Pennsylvania, blah, blah, blah. It needed a huge revamp and we knew that. But one thing that I think we talked about a lot was really refocusing on this idea of getting people to come to Vermont for an
Mhm.
intensive, even if they
Exactly.
don't live in Vermont, right? So maybe you could talk about how like that's something that you infused into, for example, because I think that would be interesting to people like that idea,
Yeah.
because I know people are interested in retreat intensives right now.
Okay.
So that
So
was one of the pivots that we were talking about.
okay, yeah, because your practice was in Bryn Mawr for years. And I think like in a lot of the online websites were not specifically your site, but just other sites were referencing Bryn Mawr. So we had to make a specific page, not just about retreats, but also about like Stowe, Vermont, and we weren't thinking about like stuffing the word Stowe all over the place because that's such an outdated concept. But it was
Right.
giving people like painting a narrative as to why it made sense, but give them all the relevant information about what would the experience be like in Stowe, right? So
Right.
that way it resonates with the reader, someone's like, okay, if I'm going to travel, let's say, if it's like with the in-state or from like the New England region, it has to be worthwhile. So we have to like paint that picture, but then we also want to make sure that it was structured in a way for Google search engines as well as answer engines to, if someone were to type in, um, EMDR retreats in like New England or Vermont, we wanted to pull it up, or or what would a retreat look like? That's probably a better way to think of it. We were given answering those questions from whether it's directly on the page or in the chat engine that was there. That's like the visibility standpoint. The other part that we focused on was some of the visuals, because I know you had did a photo shoot maybe about a year ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there were like a lot of images that they were beautiful, but we couldn't really use them before. We kind of put some pieces here and there on social, but this is a really good page to establish, okay, this is like the environment you're going to be in. So now it's like, it has like, like that rejuvenative
Yeah.
kind of experience, right? So I think that's where like the photography came in, because we didn't want to just throw pictures of you from a photo shoot that would across the website. We'd use it sparingly in some pages, but I think that retreat page is where like it made the most
Yeah.
sense, right?
Because
So
it had those nature aspects to right, because it's outside and all
exactly.
that.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's where it's like design, it's the having the conversations, it's the technical, kind of fusing it together. But at the end of the day, it was all towards the goal that you established. It wasn't
Right.
my goal. It was really working in service of what you're trying to accomplish with the retreats.
And one thing I thought that was really great as part of the process was that you sent me a list of questions that you wanted me to answer. And then what you had me do was we sat down and we did like you did a video recording of me answering all of those questions. And so tell me what you did with that
Yeah.
content, because I thought that was an interesting approach.
Yeah. So it was twofold. So one part of it was to use to create a guide page on FTP, a Future Template Parent website. So that was kind of like a definitive what you need to know about as a therapist about offering intensives. So there's that part of it. But because it was like about 20, 30-minute long, like recording, I also use that as the baseline for keeping your voice intact. So want to make sure the entire website sounded like and that's one of the key things when we're creating content now is you always have to have like that source of truth, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and so that's really where it was like foundational for me. So when I was creating some of the pages, I'm like, okay, am I straying from like the tone of voice, and kind of like going back and listen to it? It's like, what, no, like she did say this here, like it makes sense, okay, and that's
Right.
where it comes in handy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was very conversational the way we did it. It didn't feel stilted, but I thought that was a really great approach for you to get a lot of the content you needed, but like you said, like keeping that authenticity of what my voice
Right, because
is.
because if I said, what, like you're fine with, you like to write, I know that about you. But a lot of people, if I say, okay, I need you to write the about page, or I need you to write the service
Right.
page. The problem is this: most people are copywriters. Most people don't necessarily know what to write in terms of for a website. So I feel like it's unfair to put that burden on people to to say, and a lot of like web designers will do that. They'll be like, okay, I'll build a site, but you give me all the copy.
Right.
And the problem with that is, unless you know what to write or how to write, you're basically dooming the site from a visibility standpoint, because that person may be an expert, but unfortunately, most times they're writing to their peers as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to writing for the audience. And that audience is
Right.
going to be someone looking for help, right? Therapeutic help. All right. So by you giving me we can speak a lot easier conversationally than we can write
Mm-hmm.
for a specific audience. So it was to take away the burden from you having to do that heavy lifting, put it on me, but I made sure that I'm not just writing something
Right.
that sounds,
Right.
and and unfortunately, I think we've seen where that when people are just using like, I'll just put in Chat GPT and it'll spit something out, you'll get something.
Yeah.
Is it going to be accurate? Is it going to be authoritative?
Is it
Um,
going to sound,
right, on brand. Um,
yeah, and human enough, right? Because like you said, like sometimes I can write in a way that's too human to human,
right,
but like it still has to sound human. People can read content and realize right away if it just came out of
right, and then
ChatGPT.
in our world today, it's like we have to write for humans first, but we also have to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is algorithms matter,
Sure.
and it's just getting the balance right, and it can be, and it can be done, and we did it with your website.
What about so what about things like people talk always about blogging in terms of SEO?
Right.
What are your thoughts on how that plays into this like expertise to visibility to authority
Sure.
stuff? Like what
So I would
I
tell you
think
from experience, right, and we can talk about FTP's blog as an example, right?
yeah, yeah,
So your site, and we're just being super transparent to your
yeah,
audience, right?
yeah.
Your website, especially the articles, were written primarily for just your audience, right? And it resonates. The challenges, it's like a narrative that's accurate and it's your opinion, it's your viewpoints. But what we started to notice was that it wasn't getting traction on search. Like if you would read it, it was the engagement was long, right? People would read it. So what we started to
So like
do,
if someone got to the article, they were going to read it,
they're going to
but it
read
was
it,
a
right?
question:
It was just
are we
finding
getting? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right.
Right.
So like I think it was
The
like
content
Fraser's
was good, but how do we get eyes on it? Sort of.
right. So like Fraser's tables was one topic that seemed to resonate. And what I did was take a look at the article and then start to make certain alterations. And it wasn't changing the content per se; it was changing the structure of the content. And I think that's the word that I'm going to use a lot is structure. And what I mean by that is, it was doing some tweaks. So, for example, answer engines love snippets, right? So one of the things there's a definition of like Fraser tables on the like up high, and it's like bait, right, for a chat engine that says if someone were typing what that is on a chat bot or on Google, it's like, hey, I have the answer right here. This
Mhm.
paragraph, right? So that's the first thing.
Let
The
me just
second thing,
clarify something for the audience. If you guys don't know, Fraser's table, dissociative table, same thing, just different terms for them. Okay.
yeah,
So,
right. But that was a term people were looking for that we were ranking for,
perfect
uh,
definition. So it was like, yeah, got it.
right. So then started to add like bullet points of like key takeaways from the article, just little snippets, right? Because chat engines love snippets of information. They don't want to read 3,000 words. If they can get the answer in the first paragraph, they'll take it. And then, because you got to think when you're searching in like ChatGPT, and it's thinking, it's pulling from all over. And the faster you can pull that information and give you an answer, the better. So that's the
Right.
first thing was definitions, key takeaways. And then I started to add a frequently asked question block on the page, on the post, and it's kind of regurgitating what's being said in the article, but it's
Hmm.
just like I said, a structured piece of information that on the code itself on the page, it's just, like I said, it's just more bait. And as a result, within a few days, started to see traffic spike going up on the pages that those enhancements were added to. So now it still kept the tone of the
Hmm.
article intact, but
Right.
there was some information that was working for the algorithm to now go to get you the visibility. And now it's like, so we have the foundation of like, what is it, 100+ articles that we can go through. And that's what a lot of optimization is. It's just going in and just adding those enhancements, not having
Hmm.
to rewrite them, but it's
Right.
just infrastructure work at the end of the day.
Right. Right. And this is, I think, so key for people to hear because I want to stress to people, like, you don't have to do this on your own.
Uh,
And like, it's not like some people can learn how to do it, but I have no desire to learn how to do any of this, which is why I have you do it. But
mm,
then it's like, it's, there's a formula to this.
yes,
And it's not some mystical, like, thing that nobody can crack, which I think is how a lot of people feel about it. Like, there's no way to understand this and there's no way to make this work for me. And you just basically said, no, we just add some structural pieces. There's like infrastructure. It's not changing the content at all. It's just making sure that this good content is structured in the way that these search engines are going to see it, are looking.
exactly. Right. It's like you have to respect the algorithms, and they don't give you like all the secrets, but at the end of the day, a lot of this is it's best practices that you have to kind of stay up to date on.
Right.
Another thing, for example, with like structuring like on the page, is like you have the title of the article, and then you have what's known as a meta description, and that's the little snippet that you will see on the search results if you're typing in like the associative table, and you want to give it a little description of what your article is about regarding the associative table. You're going to keep that to a certain length, right? If some tools, some websites will just automatically create one for you. The problem is they may just say, what, I'll just give you a paragraph of text. And, Google's like, I don't want a paragraph of text. I want 160 characters of text.
Right.
So if you don't respect it, then that kind of might pull you down. Another big easy one, honestly, is like when you have your image for the article, it's give it a name that's related to the title of the article, rather
Oh,
than img686.jpg. You might say,
right.
like dissociative table such and such .jpg. You wouldn't think that matters, but those bots, the search bots, they're reading, and if you have one that has a description and one that doesn't, it's just gonna like, I'm not gonna bother with this other
Right.
one. So when you
Interesting.
start to do that as a best practice, and if you have, let's say, 10 articles, 50 articles, that work compounds,
Right.
like
Right.
that's really what it is. It's like it's not this going viral type of scenario. It's like an article getting hundreds of hits a month, but then you have, and this is the thing about SEO, you can have articles that's 5 years old that will still consistently bring traffic,
Right.
right?
Right.
Chat engines are going to be looking at those articles as well too now. So so it's really just building on top of
Yeah.
each other over time. So, but yeah, but
Yeah.
there's
So,
not a. Go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to, I think this is so helpful. And I wanted to point out too, you said, like, that I have hundreds, over 100 articles. That's because I just want to, because I think that can make people panic. The reason I have that many is because they're all based on my podcast episodes,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And you do not need to have hundreds of blog posts to have this impact, right?
No. Yeah.
Like you were saying, you could have a few that are done really well, that are really optimized. We're
Mm.
just trying to get people to land on your page.
Page. Right. So I'll
And
give
then,
an example
yeah.
where you don't need like hundreds of articles. You can think of it as like if you have a service that you're known for, that's a specialty. What I would recommend is like you think of like that service page is called like pillar and cluster. So the pillar is the foundational page. Let's say you do EMDR therapy in Camden, New Jersey, right? So you have a page that's talk about your practice in Camden, New Jersey. But now what you want to have is probably about 8 to 10 articles that is supporting that page. And those
Mhm.
articles can be more granular things about, your practice, the work that you're doing in Camden, New Jersey, they're supporting it. That right there will establish you as a local expert in your location as a
Mhm.
therapist doing EMDR. And
Okay.
and then what you can do is as you build out other services, you have your authoritative pillar page, and you do another, let's say, 8 to 10 posts. You don't have to do this all in one shot, right?
Right.
But like if you have a system where, you know what, I'm gonna sit down, maybe spend an hour, and I'm gonna do maybe like 3 or 4 at a time. It doesn't have to be very long. They just have to be, just relevant, right?
Right.
That right there helps, right? And then if you can post that on to, if you're on LinkedIn or social media, hey, I did a new article on this topic, and you put the link, it creates like this feedback loop,
Right.
So yeah, so there's nothing crazy about it. It's just, you start today, right? In April 1st, I'll be honest, you can start ranking for some of these topics if you follow like some of the best practices within a couple of weeks, right?
Okay, that's one thing I think people always wonder about. How long does it take for this stuff to start making an impact?
An impact, the standard that you're going to hear is about 3 months, right? That's like, personally, if you're really getting like in the weeds and you're tweaking the content, and I won't even get into some of the technical stuff. I have seen content rank within days. I mean, like literally days, right? Like,
Let me pause you here so I can tell everyone this is why you should hire Brent to do this for you, because then you don't have to wait. I just
yeah.
mean, like, I don't have any interest personally in learning or doing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time, energy, desire, right? But you know all those best practices, all the intricacies. You can make those tweaks, and
Right.
this kind of stuff can be happening for people.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so important to, like, our time is so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And we need results. So, like, why not have someone who does this as their profession do this for you?
Right.
I
Appreciate that. One thing I will tell you that is so overlooked by people. If you get featured in as many local publications as possible, I mean, so for example, there's this here in Dallas, there's a website called Voyage Dallas. And it's an interesting website where they basically reach out to people and they ask, hey, can you talk about yourself and give us a photograph, whatever, and it's free, right? And it's a little questionnaire, you fill it out, upload your pictures, and I don't know, like 2 weeks later, you're on the website. They didn't even tell you, oh, by the way, we published it, because it's just like they're just churning out features, and they ask you, hey, can you send 2 people to that might be interested in this? And what they get out of it is just a ton of traffic to this website to sell advertising against. However, because this website is so locally rooted, right, in Dallas, the SEO value is immensely high. What I realized was that within 3 days of that article getting posted, and I had my link, by the way. The reason why I did this is because I wanted them to feature my website link in the article, right? So that's called a backlink, right? And backlinks are really hard to get, but something like that, like a local website with a lot of traffic, right? Gemini actually updated my, when I typed in my name in Gemini, it actually said, hey, that's like a ranking factor for me as a fractional CMO in Dallas, because I was featured on that website talking about being a fractional CMO. So it wasn't even taking my website as much into consideration. It was saying this other website that I know is legit is saying that you are a fractional CMO in Dallas. I'm not going to tell the algorithm that you are a fractional CMO in Dallas. And within a few days, though. So now if you start to do that, where getting on maybe your Chamber of Commerce, if there's any local organization like the Rotary Club, if you can just get that link to your own practice website featured there, it just, they go, oh, it's a citation. It's the same if you're writing a paper, right? You have to cite sources. Just think of it, these local websites as citation sources.
That is such a good tip. And I was like thinking of 2 places I need to reach out to and do that. But locally here. But I was also thinking too, this reminds me, something I've been thinking about a lot is oh, how so many therapists are afraid of being visible, right? And I wish there was like a kind way to say this to people, but I just have to say it now. Like, you have to get over that. Like, we don't live in a world anymore where you can like fly under the radar and be successful as a business owner.
Right.
Like, and therapists are particularly bad about this because they're like, confidentiality and this and that. It's all that stuff. You have got to put yourself out there. If you don't want to, you need to be working for somebody else. You
Right.
can't have your own business and not like all these things. Oh, but I'm afraid I'm going to look cringy on social media. It does not matter anymore. You cannot use that as an excuse. You need to be reaching out to people. You need to be, I want to get on this. You just have to do it. It's part of your job.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and like, I just think it's so like you talking about that particular example. I can like hear people being like, oh my God, I'd be so nervous. I don't care. I'm sorry not to be like nicer about it. But like, if you want to be successful, it's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, you and I have done a ton of things over the past 5 or 6 years that have felt very uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. Yeah.
But that's the only reason we're still here, as far as I'm
Well,
concerned.
that's
You know,
exactly it. I mean, I would say, think of it this way. When you have your own business, even if you don't want to call yourself that, you may not put it in the title, you are the CEO of your business. And if you think about what the job of a CEO is of a multinational corporation, it is to represent the company. It is to be the face of the company. And the best CEOs are the ones that, it's their job to go and to do the interviews and to build relationships. And at the end of the day, that's all what marketing is. It's just building a relationship with, your potential audience, a clientele and whatnot. So I'm an introvert. I don't like social media, but I say, okay, maybe Brent feels uncomfortable being on social media, but
yeah.
Gary Consulting
Hmm.
has to be visible, right? And if
Right.
I am the face of Gary Consulting, then that just means that I have to be on there. And it's
Yeah.
finding, but I will say this though, but it's finding, you know, I always maybe not the word safe space, but finding places that allow you to be you, right?
Yeah.
And it's like building up that it's like getting on a friendly podcast, having a conversation. You get practice. It gets easier to then go on to maybe the next tier, and that's okay. But as long as people are seeing you do something, it's
Hmm.
fine. And no successful business owner will criticize you for being cringy because
No,
they
that's
understand the process.
absolutely
They will be more supportive of you because they understand they were there at some point in their own career. And so there's that. The
and
criticisms you may get from people are pretty much going to be haters that
mhm,
are have an active they have an active interest in not seeing you to be successful
right.
at the end of
And
the day.
that's about them.
It's about them. Right.
And often it's because they, whether they're realizing this or not, can't imagine doing the stuff that you are doing. Like this, I know that whenever I get negative comments, that's what I remind myself about. Like, these people on some level wish they were able to be doing what I'm doing, and that's what's coming out. Not that
Exactly.
they want to be me or anything, but there's something like, oh, you're so unethical. How could you charge that much? There's a part of that person that's like, I wish I could do that, you
Mhm.
know? And so that's what you have to remember. And it's just part of the process. We have to just sit with the uncomfortable feelings and know they'll pass and know that it's for the long-term good of your business,
Right.
you know?
Exactly. And I will also say this, there isn't like one path to doing marketing. And
Right.
then so, like I wouldn't want to like I'm not the kind of person that's going to do like a dance video. It's just
Mhm.
not me, right?
Yeah.
However, getting on the podcast and talking and about a particular topic is fine. So and the other thing, the last point I'll say about this is because there's so much AI, especially with like, Sora and video and all these things being generated, right? People really kind of like the any penalty that you may have had about being cringy or being bad at being on video actually is has really diminished because people understand like it's just that's it's just being authentic and real. And that now has the like people we've seen so much polished and artificial content that
Mm-hmm.
people want like real, and if you're giving real and it's valuable and it's giving value, you'll be surprised at the reaction that you're going to get in positive terms.
Yes. And honestly, I'm so grateful that things have trended that way because I don't know how to be polished. I couldn't be polished if I tried. My brand is like being kind of a hot mess. And so, but now like I see that so much more how much that's working for me now. People
Right.
want to be like, this is a real person I'm connecting with who is actually struggling with these things in a real way. It's not just some, yeah, like polished AI version of a human being.
Exactly.
Um, I am mindful of the time. I don't want to keep you for too long, but I did want to just quickly mention that this is something that I'm so thrilled about and so grateful to you for, is that Brent has created a module for my online video course that's all about this SEO, AEO marketing for your EMDR practice. And it is, as of today, available to anyone who's already purchased the course. It's in the course now, so you can go and watch it if you haven't seen it already. And if this is stuff you want to learn more about, in addition to all of the other content in my video course, like 12 hours of content, we now have this whole really thorough online marketing. I don't even know what the term is, but all the stuff we've been talking about for you all to learn from and use. So I just want you to know that's a resource that if you haven't purchased the course yet, maybe this is the thing that will make you realize how worth it is. But that module in and of itself would pay for the course, I'm convinced. But there's so much more in there. But I just want to let you know that that's something that we've been working on for a while, and I'm so excited is now available to people. And I just can't say enough good things, Brent, about one, the quality of what you do, the quality of the work that you have done for me over the years, and two, your integrity. As a business owner, you have so much integrity, and that is why I will always work with you over anybody else and recommend you to anyone, because that is not something that is easy to find. And like, I trust you with my business, and and as you know, a business is like a baby.
It is, yeah.
You have kids, so you know
Yeah.
that. I mean, and it keeps you up in the middle of the night and all the things that babies do. Like, you do not trust your business with just anybody. And so I am so tremendously grateful that however many years ago I took the leap and I was like, hey, let me have Brent design my website. Turns out, full disclosure, Brent is married to the best friend of my sister-in-law. So
Yeah.
that's how we connected. But I'm just so grateful that our paths crossed in this way, because you have been indispensable for me in the success of my business. And I just want other therapists to know that you could do the same for them. So I just had to say
Well,
that.
thank you so much. It means a lot. And I would want to let people know, it's not just me. It's really been having that collaborative relationship with you, because, just like you've given me the trust to try and experiment with things, but also been, when I had questions, being like actively involved, and also knowing, you know what, okay, like here's what I gave you. Now you do you, as opposed to trying to art direct and everything else. So yeah, so it's definitely been like respecting boundaries, but also knowing when to collaborate. It's been awesome.
It really has. So I just had to put that in there. But yeah, so obviously I'm going to have all your contact information in the show notes. What would you say is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to
You know
learn more
what?
about
I'll
what
be honest. Email, text message, good DMs. I mean, I just like I'm taking DMs on Instagram now, which is, but that's just adapting. I just got
Yep.
actually a really cool a video shoot job for a logistics firm. I thought it was spam at first, but turns out it was like real and from a DM. So you just have to. If I wasn't on social media, that would have
Mhm.
just never happened.
I have gotten brand deals over DM, so it's don't sleep on those. It's real stuff happens
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
People are looking for ways to make it easy, and sending someone a DM is easy. So there's that.
Yeah,
You got to remember that. Ease is important.
exactly. Yeah, awesome. But it's been great.
Yeah. Well, it's going to continue. Well, thank you so much for being here. People are going to love this episode, and I'm so excited to have everyone see what you've created in the course because it's so valuable. So thank you so much.
All
And
right.
thank you everyone for listening, and speak to you next week.